Everyone, thank you for joining us for our session, Attack Surface Management, Challenges, Myths, and Solutions. My name is Julia Kirsten. I'm the Global Events and Marketing Manager here at Trustwave, and I'll be your host. Today, we are pleased to bring together 3 of the highly respected cybersecurity leaders featured in our recent ebook, 8 experts on the myths of attack surface management, to share their expertise and insights on how to build a strong and resilient security posture. Our experts, Ed William, Trustwave VP of Pen Testing, Corey Daniels, Trustwave CISO, and Barry Coatsworth, Guidehouse Director of Risk, Compliance, and Security, will share their experiences and best practices for effective attack surface management. Just a few housekeeping items before, so you can get the most out of your session today. If you are viewing the session live, our webinar platform allows you to customize your viewer screen, so feel free to adjust the size and positioning of all the different windows to accommodate your liking. We do recommend that you use Chrome as the browser of choice. If you have any problems with the audio or session delivery, I always recommend that you hit refresh, and I promise you won't need to re-log in, and hopefully the system will overcome any connectivity issues. Today's webinar will include both a presentation and a question and answer session. You will find the questions window in your webinar screen, and we encourage you to enter questions as you think of them throughout the presentation, and we'll address as many as possible at the end. Lastly, today's presentation will be recorded, and we'll be sending a follow-up email to everyone with a link to that recording. A copy of the recording will be made available on demand on our website for future reference as well. Without further ado, let's get started. Gentlemen, over to you.
Julie, thank you so much for the introduction. And I'm thrilled to be here joining with Barry Coatsworth and Ed Williams to talk about this conversation around attack surface management. Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, because it's wonderful to see a global audience in attendance to explore and demystify this topic with industry leaders such as Barry and Ed. And really just have a natural dialogue and conversation from the past, present, and kind of where do we see the future in how we've handled attack surface management. What's been some of the lessons learned from ourselves and from that we observed with the organization and the industry, and really what are ways that you can get, regardless of your role inside your business as a security leader, as an operator and an analyst in the organization. What can you take away to facilitate dialogue and conversations about how to embrace and leverage enhancing visibility across your attack surface and your data ecosystem in a way to strengthen your cyber defense and your resilience? So given that fact that we have a global audience and a diverse audience, we like to naturalize and tailor the conversation as much as we can to with everyone here. If you would please take a moment and let us know and give us a perspective about where you feel you and or your business you see kind of are in your attack surface management journey, and what, even from a terminology and a lexicon perspective, what it means to you. That will allow us to help shape the dialogue and tune the dialogue with you. We'll show poll results in a moment, but without further ado, let me please introduce Barry Coatsworth. Barry, thank you for joining us today and your contribution to our ebook around attack surface management. If I could please give you the floor to provide the audience an introduction with your great expertise.
And security arena. I've got about over 30 years experience in cybersecurity from a lot of sectors: supply chain, attack surface management, pen testing. I've worked in quite a few sectors as well, commercial as well as the public sector. I was responsible, or one of the people responsible for the UK government's Cyber Essentials scheme, which is its baseline basic cyber hygiene for most organisations. And I've also advised the UK Parliament on a few subjects as well. So Guidehouse is a global company. We're a management consultancy both in the public commercial sectors. We've got broad capabilities in technology risk consulting, and our clients from anything from defence and military along to healthcare and public sector. We probably think one of the largest defence contractors in the US. And a lot of our cyber team are ex-federal government, FBI, NSA, and also Department of Defense as well. So we've got a good broad spectrum of what we bring in cybersecurity.
Thank you for that, Barry. It's bringing an interesting perspective when it's you look at both defending, and your organization just happens to do business both in private and public sector, is the ability to bring kind of unique insights from both worlds of public sector defense and also inside the private sector. So thank you for the introduction. We are now going to share poll results, and then we'll get into the dialogue. And thank you, team, for sharing what your perspectives are. So, it's the attack surface management, right? And there's a couple terminologies, whether you lean towards Gartner, you lean towards IDC, you lean towards some of the analysts in some of the ways that they define it. But I appreciate the insight and the honesty, because I think that's where we'll start today's conversation. Is let's demystify attack surface management into something real, and talk about translating it into what is the attack surface management? How do we define attack surface management? And so with that in mind, Ed, if I can share it to you, like, can you help start us off about, really looking at what is attack surface management, and why are we talking about it today? Like, why is there more, dare I say, buzz, or why is there more attention to this terminology now versus, let's say, 2, 3, or dare I say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, thanks, Corey. There's a lot of questions there, so I'll try and take them one at a time. So I'll start with why the buzz around attack surface management, and then I'll go into what I think attack surface management is. So clearly, what we're doing as an industry isn't working. I think we can all be honest with that. We're still seeing attacks being successful, organizations getting compromised, things being broken, policy failing, people being manipulated. So what we're doing traditionally in terms of pen testing, vulnerability scanning, red teaming, all of that stuff, wrapped up with policy and good governance, isn't quite getting it to what we need to get it to be. So we need to do something else. What that new thing is, to my mind, is attack surface management. What do I think attack surface management is? I see it as the continuous process of finding, classifying, and then assessing the security of the entire organization. So there's a few important parts in there. Continuous. I come from a pen testing background, and pen testing isn't always continuous. It has its parts, but by and large, it isn't. It's normally a one and done type engagement. So there needs to be something else. Ensuring that we're classifying, because we do know that some risks and issues and vulnerabilities are more important than others. We see lots and lots of things around weak ciphers and encryption type issues, and they're not always that important. Some of them are, and then some of them aren't. So we need to understand and classify what is important and what isn't important. And then we also then need to look at the entire organization. Again, with my pen test hat on, we will, when we're doing a pen test, look at a small part of an infrastructure, a small part of a web application. And it might be very, very good, or more often than not, it might be bad or very, very bad. So what we need to look at is how can we look at the entire organization? So the people, the process, and the technology, and then wrap around then some sort of methodology that's going to be continually looking at all of those things. And the answer isn't just pen testing, it isn't just vulnerability scanning, it isn't just ISO 27001 or Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus or whatever else. So it's all of those things.
Oh, very good, Ed, right? And the emphasis on continuous. Barry, if I can ask, is there anything that you would add, or from your lens, add or counterbalance to what Ed just shared from your experiences and what you've observed in defining attack surface management, and why is it important to the business?
Yeah, I suppose attack surface management. You can probably go down the rabbit hole. I think as I described, a few things that are not red teaming, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing. So I suppose the first thing is, what is the scope of attack surface management? What does it cover? And you can look at it external and internal, attack surfaces. So we got things like cloud environments, endpoints, internet assets. We've got things going that we look at is IoT, Internet of Things, and sensors as well. That increase that one as well. We've got a number of other things as well. Threat intelligence also plays an important time in attack service management. It's a critical aspect, though, of your overall understanding what your risk is. What you want to do is monitoring for exploitable, points on your service, points of exposure on your system or your network. There's a few reasons why it's probably more important now. We've got things like digital transformation. Organizations are rapidly changing their technology. We've got shadow IT. There's lots of things out there that we weren't aware of before. Increased cyber threats. We've seen with the state of the world currently, our adversaries, the cyber threats are increasing. I don't think really ever decreased. The other really good one for attack service management is regulatory compliance. It's really good to show some KPIs, some metrics on our risk exposure and how you are as a business. Other one as well is remote work. A lot of us doing remote working. Again, increases your, from a business perspective, that increases your attack surface. And again, I said IoT. But I think the other one as well is we talked about technology things as well. But the other attack surface is really your human risk capital. The people you employ. They're also, to a degree, part of your exposure as well. And I know we often talk about the human risk capital. It's quite more technical, but it's quite important to get the human risk part of the education awareness. Phishing and that kind of thing. There's three things that will normally tend to cause an incident, and I call it the 3 Ps. So it's passwords, patching, and people. Any of these, from your attack service, your weak passwords, unpatched systems, and also so people to a degree tend to always, cause a breach or part of a breach. So I think having all those three things, we said, people, process, technology, is really important as a business to get your attack service management and also reduce the overall risk of the business. But it also gives you some peace of mind as well. But it does depend on the scope, on what's included, and the breadth and depth of it in that regard.
No, those are excellent points. To both of you, just before we pivot, just we talk about the scope, and the one thing we hadn't touched on yet is just the importance, especially given you look at the top threats of 2023, regardless of the publication, and you continue to see third party risk. So I'll call it supply chain resilience or supply chain attack surface management. So how much do you see you can't defend what you don't know? And so how much do you see the digital proliferation that you mentioned, Barry, as example, on the cloud journey, influencing kind of the attack surface scope expansion of the cyber program, and how much does that involve defending the supply chain of the business?
Well, okay, to be honest with you, attack service management can significantly contribute to securing your supply chain, quite easily. There's a few things we can do. We can continue to monitor their exposure of supply chain assets externally. It helps with vendor risk assessments. The first thing is understanding the risk that your vendors approach, and are they tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, or whatever, what bucket you want to put them in. Then we've got things like threat intelligence. Keeping understanding of vulnerabilities. Which parts of our supply chain are potentially vulnerable. Helps with contractual measures as well, helping contractors understanding the risk for the supply chain. Helps reinforce better clauses in contracts or more clauses. But really, the ultimate one really helps the supply chain. It really helps with collaboration and communication. We found X, Y, and Z. This is a risk. Are you exposed on this one? Or we've got a good view of your supply chain and your attack surface. We've seen you're vulnerable to these X, Y, and Z. What can we do to close this gap? Increase our supply chain resilience. So it works quite well, especially on the vendor risk management side of things. Understand the risk that your suppliers, third parties, and vendors have as part of your supply chain. Now, depends how far you go. Normally, as a business, we wouldn't obviously do that on every single supplier. It's just unwilling. We would choose the critical suppliers that provide critical services. Managed service providers, those ones that are the key supply chain, and also ones I think in the States for the SBOM. Understanding as well on the software one how far that goes down and how that impacts the overall business as well. So very important, I think. Not often used. We tend to use scorecards more than attack service management, but scorecards can also help in the overall attack service management and risk profile. But ultimately, for me, All I want to know is which suppliers are high risk and how can I work with them to reduce the risk to make it more cyber resilient? Because, as a business, we're in it all together. Our supply chains are fundamental to our success. More so for retail and maybe manufacturing, but ultimately they're really an extension to the business.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Barry. So as we look at a couple of things that are really important that you both touched on is just from controlling what we can control, our cyber capabilities to do continuous verification and attack surface discovery is becoming paramount in a very fluid data ecosystem. And that fluidity is, and Barry, to what you highlighted, is as much about users and contractors, and especially as we push more and more data to BYOD, kind of the ability to work from anywhere, has helped drive the human being as an additional endpoint. That how do we just ensure that we have continuous verification and discovery of how our attack surface is moving, and then do we have coverage, yes or no, and how we communicate, as cyber leaders, and our ability to have confidence in our current defensive capabilities and breadth of monitoring across that data, but also how we communicate that to the business. Ed, we all contributed to this wonderful ebook that each one of these topics we could do a session on to themselves, but from the 5 myths that in no particular order that we explored as part of helping identify kind of core attributes in how we look at and define attack surface management. Ed, what's been your perspective of where you've seen the most of these? What's your guidance around some of these myths? Pick your poison in terms of where you want to start from the 5 myths. What can you share from some of your insights about where we see some of these myths most prevalent amongst organizations that you see?
Yeah, no, thanks. So I'll be logical. I'll start at the very left. So the basics of cyber hygiene are easy. Having been a pen tester for probably close to 20 years, this one resonates louder and harder than the others. It's unbelievable how often some organizations overstate their current maturity. Lots of new technology being implemented, lots of whiz-bang technology. Yet when we come to actually pen test and look at the environment, there are basic issues. And I don't mean basic in terms of trivial, basic in terms of really broad and hard things to fix. So Barry mentioned people patching and passwords. I like to use passwords, patching, and policy. Those are the things, so there's 4 Ps. Those are the things that I always see causing people issues. The basics and the lack of maturity in certain parts of the business. When we're conducting pen testing or some sort of assurance work, it's very revealing and it's almost very binary in some ways. This is good, this is bad. There might be some grey, but generally this is good, this is bad. And when we come to do our wash-up sort of post-pen test and we've compromised an environment, normally one of 2 things gets said. And if you've ever spoken to me, I tell the story all the time, but it's, we compromised X, Y, Z. It'll be, oh, I didn't know what that is, or I thought we turned that off. And that is what we're talking about when we're talking about basics. It's really making sure that assets and data flows are understood. Once you know what assets and data flows you've got, you can really then look to make sure that the hygiene across the organization, across everything, those AS400s, those mainframes, those Windows NT4 boxes, everything is done and is as secure as it can be. Of course, you might need that NT4 box. We still see them, but there's obviously things that you can do to mitigate and reduce the risk to make sure that it isn't going to be easily popped. So making sure that you've got your basics covered, and they are the basics, not because they're easy, but because they're hard, and they need to be done across everything. And that is really, really hard. So I would recommend, if anybody gets anything out of this, that it is you're looking at the basics all the time and making sure that every corner of that organization, of your organization, is secure in terms of patching, password, and policy. And if it isn't, why isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose they're talking around that one again. It's as you see with the attack surface and everything else, it's usually the basics that catch you out. You can go to any, I suppose, any supplier with the latest, wuzzy lights, flashing lights, technology saying it'll do X, Y, and Z. But ultimately, normally, from my experience, most organizations have enough technology. Their walls are high enough. They're just not really actually utilizing technology to its best of its availability, or they're just not getting the basics right. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the legacy systems from the 1970s, 1980s, so even around that time, sometimes the basics weren't a fundamental part of that one. But modern computers nowadays, modern has the basics in there. But as you say again, the basic hygiene, which should be fairly simple to apply, is in most cases of most organisations sometimes quite difficult for for a number of reasons in that regard. And I think that falls into what you said. It's down to policy in that regard. Sometimes it's ease of use. Sometimes you made a change and not reverted to it. But you're right. The basics are what catch people out most of the time. Most of the time, it's the basics. Basic hygiene that will catch you out. Nothing really too advanced. There's always advanced threats, but it's usually the basics. Or
of course. And it's worth thinking about as well when we're conducting pen tests, that even though they're time limited, we spend a significant amount of time understanding what we're looking at, whether it's a network, whether it's an IoT device, or an application, or whatever it might be. A lot of our focus is what is this? How big is this? What are all the avenues? Is every avenue being looked at and checked? And that is a lot of what we do, is making sure that we go through thoroughly, that we know exactly what's happening. And if something is changed in terms of a firewall review or a patch that's not been, one missing patch and one host, that's how we get in. And it's hard. It's hard in these large, complex, heterogeneous environments to get your arms covered around everything. But it's essential, absolutely essential.
Yeah, and I think part of that one as well is a good asset inventory. I've seen organisations where they've had a Windows NT or XP machine on the network, which should have been decommissioned or thought it was decommissioned. They didn't know it was on. There was and I think it brings on really probably onto the next one, which is IT solutions, that IT support, things on your network that shouldn't be on your network because you've got a lack of visibility. Your attack service management internally doesn't have a good asset. Know what assets are in there. So solutions will appear. You will get shadow IT. You will get people putting things on the network for development purposes or testing purposes that are on there that you just don't know about, and it's not been decommissioned, or someone's left the organization, it wasn't documented correctly. You've got all these things that the hidden aspects of your network that you don't really see until an adversary sees it
and compromises it. Absolutely.
Yes.
You both hit on an interesting point where for a large part of our audience that's just starting their attack surface management journey or has begun it and looking at how we get more value out of it. It seems asset inventory and maintaining a high fidelity asset inventory feels like it was a lot easier to do 15 years ago than it is today. So we look at maintaining a high fidelity asset inventory for our cloud or our multi-cloud ecosystem, which may or may not include, the inventory of the, you take API discovery and how secure APIs are, which has been another hot button in successful threat actor exploits in taking advantage of, I'll call it new innovation, the modern world where it seems like the more and more SaaS applications, the more multi-cloud we are, the more digital we are, the more APIs that we have in our environment than ever have before, and it looks like it's going to continue to proliferate. It sounds like defining scope is fairly important as part of a journey in attack surface management, because from both of your perspectives, it seems fair to say it's hard to just do a big bang all at once. Or, so how would you look at targeting? How do you share with the business? How do you prioritize increasing attack surface discovery in your cloud environment, in your OT environment? Where do you feel like you begin?
Well, I'll begin with a very simple answer. You need accurate data. It doesn't matter if it's in the cloud or somewhere else. If you don't have accurate data, and that is the bedrock of attack surface management, is having accurate, up-to-date data. Data on software, data on hardware, even the human elements. each of these is a vector for your attack surface. So if you don't have good accurate data, then it's stale, it's out of date. You're not so sure what your attack surface is. You're not so sure what's in the cloud. We're not so sure what's our internal network or what our third parties have. But the other one as well, as part of that one, you've got all this data from all these sources, is visualizing it. You need to visualize the data as well to make sense of it, because you'll have maybe thousands of data points or things around that one then. But accurate data. Without accurate data, your attack surface management, you'd be putting resources and effort to things that might not be of risk or don't exist in that regard. And you might be going down a rabbit hole, chasing your own tail or vice versa. And in today's environment, you've got to be careful with your resources, and where financial resources and also personal resources, where you're going to spend time and effort in dealing with these risks. So for me, I don't know what Ed thinks about it. It's accurate data first of all. You need accurate data. Part of that's asset inventory, but there's more ways than one for that one. But for me, accurate data is the first point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just to build on that as well, every organization is different. Every organization has got things that are considered important and probably things that are considered slightly less important, whether that's data, records, private information. So it's really understanding what is critical and key to the business, and then trying to work backwards from that. Like a lot of our discussions, specifically around red teaming and purple teaming, which forms part of this attack surface management, is around what is key and what is critical to you. What is the one thing that you don't want to get a phone call at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon and say it's been lost or compromised? Once you understand what that is, then you can work backwards and you can get all your bases covered through different types of technology, whether it's vulnerability scanning, pen testing, red, purple teaming, continuous scanning, whatever your choice of poison might be.
Yeah, and also the good one is, and it's hard to say this one, is you can't protect everything. You can't, you've got to make some allowances. You can't protect everything on your network or your inventory. So understanding where your key data is, who your crown jewels are, what you want to protect, what you're willing to, from a criticality list, what's less important. Because you might, in an instance or something, you might have to sacrifice something just to say something else. So, but yeah, it's a hard thing to say that. I'd love to say, I can't give. I think we're going to one of the questions. You can't be 100% secure. The answer is no. You can't give 100% protection to everything. It's just not feasible for the business in that regard. It will slow things down. People will cut corners. So look at the critical systems, work from there, and look what's needs protecting most, and strengthen those controls. And also maybe just don't put as many controls in other areas. It has to be a balanced approach. If it is too secure, your network, your engineers, they'll just find ways around it, not because of maliciously, they just want to get the job done, and they've got things in place that stop them making a change or looking at something or installing something the right way around in that regard. So over securing something, it can be just as bad as under securing something, especially on your attack surface.
Yeah, I'd add on to that 100. You can be 100% secure. Of course you can't. There's no one point in the day or in the week and the month where that's it. We're 100% secure. Everyone go home. Tier medals for everybody. It's tomorrow there might be a new threat, a new vulnerability. There's patches released constantly. You've got people in an organization who are probably doing things that you don't want them to do in terms of passwords and putting things on machines and back to shadow IT and all those different things. So it's really important to understand that you will never be 100% secure. You need to be secure enough. What that is dependent on what your organization is and what it looks like and where you are on your maturity journey. You might be just looking at the basics, or you might be looking at cloud-related stuff or shadow IT stuff. But it's important that you're continually improving and you're continually making it harder for attackers to do what they need to do, and that's get in, move laterally, do something malicious, steal something, and get out. It's effectively what they're trying to do.
Ed and Mary, I want to. There's a question from the audience. I want to weave into this topic around. It's finding that balance between business operations, business speed, and security, and kind of trying to weave in secure by design versus security as a bolt-on. After the fact, as more of an auditing function and more of a chasing the business function. How do you see attack surface enhancing and prioritizing attack surface management how can this be leveraged to, I'll call it, communicate with less friction inside the business? Like, how can this be a business tool for the different leaders, whether you lead, vulnerability, cyber defense, whether you're a security leader in the audience? How can you use this to help facilitate a dialogue in an attempt to minimize the friction that's more data-driven about navigating and managing the attack surface?
I think that the first thing ultimately is you focus on risk. Attack surface management is a tool that will help you make good decisions informed on risk. And business leaders want to know risk. They want to know about security. They want to know what's the risk, what's the impact to us on this one. And attack surface management can help you look at where the riskiest parts of sometimes some of the riskiest parts of your network of business are. They can help you from a CISO's perspective, from a leader's perspective. They'll help you understand what you need to prioritize for the next year's budget. Do we need to do a refresh? Who do I have to work with? It helps understand, to a degree, how weak and how secure you are at the same time for the execs. It's really, so like I said, go back to one. It's really important for risk. Risk management is ultimately the best one for attack surface management. It's a tool in your arsenal that will help you find things, help you understand priorities. It will also, to a degree, sometimes can independently give you some verification to the execs, to the leaders, of how secure you are. Not just yourself saying it, but here's some metrics. Here's some things with some of the tooling that's showing that we compare to our competitors. We're slightly better, we're slightly worse on those ones. And execs always like to know: are we better than our competitors? How do we compare with our peers in that regard? So I find it's just really good for risk management and risk assurance around that one. If you're talking around embedding attack surface management in things like, secure by design, you've got to understand, which, it's waterfall, agile. You've just got to look at different ways of doing that one. User stories in one, sprints in that case on the third level. In theory, security should be like health and safety. It should be part of your DNA. You should be doing it anyway. But it's seldom done as part of the DNA of an organization. Usually, it's usually seen sometimes, depending on the maturity of the organization, as an IT problem. Sometimes it seems to be too esoteric that they don't really understand cybersecurity. So a lot of it is really around communications. Communication with people. The question is, what value do I get out of attack surface management? What does it show me, and what can I improve on? And does it meet business objectives? So if it doesn't meet business objectives, or help you meet business objectives, or generate revenue, or protect revenue, then you've got to ask the question: what value is it to an organization? But for me, it helps define risk. It helps show risk, and helps prioritize some cost and resources on that regard. And also gives you a bit of peace of mind. Not always, but it gives you peace of mind knowing that, especially on a continuous process, that things haven't really changed significantly from last week or this week. And if they have, you'll ask the questions why. So it gives a bit of peace of mind. Change happens all the while. And in security, sometimes change can cause an insult or an issue. So it's a few things, but mainly it's for risk in that regard.
That's excellent, Barry, and just encourage the audience, if you have thoughts and questions, please share them in. And we want to be respectful of everyone's time, so we are in the kind of final turn, as it were, in the discussion for the day. Ed, to Barry's points in using attack surface management as a business, as a way to to translate security into business language. Any other thoughts or perspectives to build off what Barry shared, and using attack surface management as a way to communicate security more effectively with business stakeholders?
Yeah, I
drive change.
Again, I've been around the block a long time, and it's worth remembering. You wouldn't believe it, looking at me, how young and fresh I look, but I am. Security is actually an enabler. It allows organizations to do things that they wouldn't be able to do normally. Like us sitting here working remotely, all of that is possible through good governance and good security. So once you have that angle, you can then look at things slightly differently. Can we push this barrier? Can we push this new type of thing that we're trying to do with good security and governance? And will that allow us to, Barry mentioned, increase revenue, not lose revenue? But it is a really good tool to get things done. It shouldn't be, and I think it's been turned recently, it shouldn't be a blocker to stop things. It should be an enabler. And if we look at things through that lens, it suddenly becomes very different. And the security team should be, as Corey is in our organization, on your side, allowing things to happen and to move quickly.
Yeah, and as you're saying, security should help a business take risks. More informed risks. But all businesses need to take risks, and security shouldn't stop them from taking risks because the business will not grow. It should help them take risks in an appropriate, stable manner. That's good for generating revenue or customer retention or whatever objective the business has.
Yep.
Excellent. And so just, we got time for one more question. And so I'll just share, for of these 5 myths here, what do we perceive to be the most difficult to change is what came from the audience?
I'll start. I'll probably say the 100% secure one. That's the one I see organizations, not that they say they're 100% secure, but they certainly overestimate where they are in terms of their maturity journey. And it sometimes takes a couple of purple or red issues in a pen test to sort of bring them back and realign to the focus and to what's important. I'll hop on to the next one quickly. We know that pen testing isn't the be-all and end-all, but it certainly helps. It's certainly a really good part of an attack surface management program. So I really focus on making sure that you don't overestimate, don't rely too much on tooling and on one thing, because there is no silver bullet. So it's really important to make sure you've got all your bases covered very quickly.
Yeah, no, I'd echo what Ed said on that one. Yeah, the myth is, no one can give 100% guarantees. No one can say anything's 100% secure. The easy way to do that one is, as I said, run a red team or a pen test, and just show with the timeline how easy it was to compromise the assets from beginning to end. I think we did one many years ago. We called it gone in 60 seconds because it also was 60 seconds from a phishing email for someone to get on a network, which is meant to be fairly secure, and laterally move across, and then sleep for a while. So yes, it's very interesting. It sometimes can be a bit frictionless as well with some of the technology teams that you're working with. Some people have got a lot of pride in building infrastructure and the architects and they're quite secure. So I think part of this is going down is be a partner to them. We're not there to really find fault in things. We're really there to show where improvements could be made and where things didn't reach the mark, and how can we improve this going forward. Now, so I think that the partnership approach works a lot better than saying, you say you had a great architecture, it took us 60 seconds, and now we own everything on your network. You weren't 100% secure. I know the audit yesterday said you were 100% secure, but today's a different day. So, but that's probably the easiest one to change in that regard, is just running a test, but working with them to improve the results. The remediation. I like doing as well cat and mouse with the SOC as well. See how quickly I respond to these things as well. Improving internal communications is really good. So there's lots of improvements you can see in that one, but you're not 100% secure. Even if you have an air-gapped environment, you're not 100% secure. You might be slightly more secure, but believe me, it's air gaps do not make it that much more secure than a non-air-gapped infrastructure.
Oh, thank you, Ed, and thank you, Barry. Right, so just in some of on one level, would love to be having this conversation next time on a Chesterfield couch, in front of a fireplace with perhaps a beverage of choice in hand. This has been a wonderful conversation and dialogue, and I do hope the audience, everyone, comes to a session like this. I hope you got what you wanted out of it, based off understanding attack surface management a little bit better, how to take away some of these things, or how to translate this into your everyday operations, or how to bring back some of these shared learnings and recommendations back to your business. With that said, I'll be closing out the call for today. And just let me express my thanks for our global audience joining us. Barry, thank you for joining us today, and Ed, and yourself as well. It was a lovely dialogue. If I could ask for the audience to please take a moment and give us feedback on the, I'll call it post-show survey. We do take these seriously and welcome your thoughts and perspectives on the tenor and the approach and the content. So as we continue to facilitate these style of fireside chats, we can continue to hone our trade in ensuring this is content that you seek to understand. As far as additional content and resources, there is a mail button at the bottom of this. There are resources available for you to access, as the three of us did contribute to demystifying the 5 myths that we've identified for our attack surface management. So no shortage of resources to further explore. Unfortunately, we'd love to spend the day with you, but you have priorities too. So please do follow up if you have additional questions, and we'd be happy to support and be a sounding board. Barry, thank you so much, and wish you all well. I'll be closing out the call now. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.